But that very wealth and that very resourcefulness, because it is now a good 100 years or so old, has, if you pardon my Hegelianism, become its own opposite. It is becoming a terrible burden because it fuels, particularly in the leading politicians of both parties, a notion that we should never be deterred by the problems. Yes, of course, we have the problems, but we have all the resources needed to get through them. This is a terrible mistake. You can have all the resources. Look, if you juxtapose Iran in February of this year to the United States as military adversaries, and then you add the Israelis as allies of the United States, what is the prognosis one would come to about the probability of the outcome of that war? And the answer is poor Iran. But it would have been a mistake.
大家好，这里是华人看世界 CNView 频道。今天的对话聚焦一个正在加速变化的世界。美国对伊朗发动经济制裁，为什么油价反而上涨？一个看似局部的决定，又如何通过能源、汇率、国债和住房市场层层传导，最终冲击美国自身？理查德·沃尔夫教授将用荷兰拦海大堤的故事，解释全球经济牵一发而动全身的连锁反应。更值得关注的是，美国的盟友与对手正在建设自己的工业、金融、支付和安全体系，逐步摆脱对美国的依赖。股市繁荣为何掩盖不了民众的失望？特朗普的关税、制裁与强硬姿态，究竟是在挽救霸权，还是暴露帝国衰落？从伊朗、俄罗斯和中国到欧洲未来可能出现的政治转向，本期访谈将带你看清美国正在经历的，或许并不是普通的经济波动，而是一场世界秩序的深层重组。
For me, the conceptual framework that I find valuable is the notion that we are living through the decline of the American empire. I believe that captures the linkage, or what connects all the things you just went through. And let me explain. I would say that the number of references to a declining empire that I see around me in the American press and in American culture today is 10 times what it was 1 year ago. Very small 1 year ago, and still small, but it's 10 times what it was. I am no longer, as I was for a while, one of really very few writers who's talked like that, or who felt that that was, for the others, it seemed too much. I was way ahead. Maybe that was coming, but number one. Number two, what was holding back people from seeing the decline of the empire was a view that is relevant to answer your question. The United States remains, of course, a very rich, very resourceful economic and political system, for that matter, as well as military and all of that. It would be foolish, and that is not my intent, to suggest otherwise. Okay? But that very wealth and that very resourcefulness, because it is now a good 100 years or so old, has, if you pardon my Hegelianism, become its own opposite. It is becoming a terrible burden because it fuels, particularly in the leading politicians of both parties, a notion that we should never be deterred by the problems. Yes, of course, we have the problems, but we have all the resources needed to get through them. This is a terrible mistake. You can have all the resources. Look, if you juxtapose Iran in February of this year to the United States as military adversaries, and then you add the Israelis as allies of the United States, what is the prognosis one would come to about the probability of the outcome of that war? And the answer is poor Iran. But it would have been a mistake. It would have been a mistake because not because the United States isn't a military power many times that of Iran. It is. But it is a military power whose leaders are so used to muddling through, as the British used to say about their empire. We muddle through. Somehow our wealth and our resources have been able to get it. And there's some truth to that. There is truth. You had the wealth, you built up the wealth, and the wealth saw you through earlier crises. I mean, American capitalism collapsed in the 1930s. I mean, it really fell apart for a decade. And yet it came back. It had the resources to rebuild. Despite the World War, and partly because of it, they were able to do it. This time, I don't think so. I think the uniqueness of the United States and the wealth that it was able to create, particularly after World War II, is unprecedented in its roots and therefore in its vulnerability. And allow me just to summarize it. World War II was the end of the European and Japanese empires. They lost it. India left Britain, and Africa left Germany, France, and so forth. They held on economically. Yes, I understand that. But basically, they lost their empires. And who gathered those empires into its hands? The United States. The United States emerges able, eager to replace the Europeans. Who becomes the big friend of India once they disconnect from Britain? The United States. Who becomes active all over Africa as the French and the Belgians and all have to withdraw? The Americans. The Americans, therefore, got the benefit of being the inheritor of European colonialism while positioning itself as the ally of the colonies, because after all, it was an ex-colony itself. What a wonderful, and all of that wrapped up in the notion we deliver democracy. We are the bringers of democracy. And so your colonial, get rid of them. Remember, the Suez Canal fiasco in 1955 and so on. We will take over. And that gave the United States, and this is the important part, it also gave them the position that the Europeans had enjoyed. This little Belgium enjoys the resources of the Congo, arguably the richest part of Africa, an immense country with immense resources, funneling all that wealth into little Belgium. Of course, Belgium could become wealthy, have a high standard of living, enjoy all that wealth. And the same with France, and the same Spain, Portugal, Britain, and on and on and on. All of that is now, I'm exaggerating, of course, but all of that is now funneling into the United States, which in the second half of the 20th century is reeling from the wealth cascading into its, even if the wealth pulled out of Africa was cut by half of what the Belgians did. When you add up all the Belgians, the French, the Germans, and so on, it overwhelmed the United States, literally, gave it an enormous boost. So it produced in the second half of the 20th century the absurd position of the United States. Number one political, number one exporter, number one importer, number one capital source. Dollar is the global currency, all of it. But it was inherently vulnerable to the absurd circumstance that those two oceans exempted them from the horrors of World War I and II, which is how the colonial Europe destroyed itself with Japan. So what we are living through now is the withdrawal of all the parts. And look at Iran. It's like a screaming symbol of all of this. We begin our story with overthrowing Mossadegh in 1953, a lame operation undertaken by the British, but basically orchestrated by the CIA. And who gets put into place? An American choice, the Shah. That old family, pleasing to the Dulles brothers in Washington, so they put him in there. The way the State Department selected Zelensky to stick him in as the leader in Ukraine a few years ago. Okay, and then you have Iran, a generation under this crazy dictator, the Shah. He's eventually overthrown by the only social force he couldn't destroy, which was the Islamic religious community. So who overthrows him? That community, the Ayatollah and the community. And then the United States declares, well, that's not acceptable. We didn't pick it. You overthrew us. The Shah, by the way, was whisked out of Iran and ended his life in the United States, where he was given asylum. I mean, as if the symbols weren't obviously organized. But here's now the point. The oppressed, the overthrown, the perfect example of what I'm trying to sketch as the history is now coming full circle. That Iran has stymied the United States. It finally figured out how, by putting its missile silos underground in its mountains, etc., how to get out of. Well, let me exaggerate, but every other country is doing that too.
回看整场对话，真正值得我们带走的，或许并不是某一场战争的输赢，也不是某一位政治人物的得失，而是一个更深层的问题。当一个国家长期依靠旧有的权力、财富和制度优势维持世界地位时，它是否还具备重新认识现实、调整方向的能力？沃尔夫教授用了一个非常形象的比喻：荷兰堤坝出现漏洞时，孩子用手指堵住一个缺口，可很快旁边又会裂开新的口子。如今美国面临的正是这样一种不断补洞、不断失控的局面。制裁原本被当成解决问题的工具，却可能推高能源价格，扰乱货币汇率，冲击债券市场，进一步抬高房贷利率，最后又反过来伤害本国经济。一个局部决定，经过贸易、金融、能源和资本市场的层层传导，最终可能演变成全球性的震荡。这说明今天的世界早已不是彼此隔绝的国家拼图，而是一张高度交织的网络。政府债务、企业债务和家庭债务、金融机构持有的证券、国家之间的能源运输和货币结算，任何一环发生剧烈变化，都可能让风险迅速扩散。过去那种认为只要凭借强大实力就能把问题转移出去，把代价交给别人承担的思维正在失效。更值得注意的是，经济危机和政治危机并不是两条彼此平行的道路。股市持续上涨，并不代表普通人的生活正在改善。相反，当财富越来越集中在少数人手中，房价、利息、能源和生活成本不断上升时，股市的繁荣反而会凸显社会的不平等。那些没有股票或者只能拥有极少资产的人，很难从金融市场的上涨中获得安全感，他们感受到的可能只是一个与自己无关的繁荣世界。当传统政党无法解释这种落差，也无法提出可信的解决方案时，民众自然会转向那些至少愿意承诺改变的人。这里的关键并不一定是美国社会已经整体转向某种意识形态，而是越来越多的人对现有制度失去了信心。年轻人尤其如此，他们出生在一个被承诺充满机会的资本主义社会，却发现稳定的工作、可负担的住房、体面的医疗和有尊严的生活正在变得越来越遥远。对他们而言，过去的冷战叙事和帝国荣光已经十分陌生，眼前真实存在的是沉重的债务、不断上涨的账单以及看不到出口的未来。 因此，政治极化的背后，往往不只是文化立场的冲突，更是现实利益无法得到解决后的情绪爆发。当一个社会无法通过正常制度处理经济分配、战争成本和公共服务问题，人们就容易被象征性的姿态、极端的口号和身份对立所吸引。政治会因此变得越来越吵闹，却越来越难以触及真正的问题。这场讨论还把我们的视线拉回到美国霸权的历史根基。二战之后，欧洲和日本的殖民体系瓦解，美国接替了原有的主导位置，并在全球贸易、金融、军事和技术体系中建立起巨大的影响力。美元的特殊地位、海外资本流动、军事同盟和国际规则共同构成了美国长期繁荣的重要基础。但问题在于，曾经带来优势的体系也可能逐渐变成无法摆脱的负担。当一个国家习惯了拥有特权，就容易把特权误认为能力，把过去的成功误认为未来必然会继续成功。他可能相信，只要宣布制裁，别人就会屈服；只要提高关税，产业就会自动回流；只要投入更多军费，战争就一定能够获胜；只要继续借债，经济就仍然可以维持增长。然而，现实不会因为政治口号而改变，资源再多也无法弥补战略判断的失误，军力再强也不能保证每一场战争都能按照计划结束，金融地位再高也不意味着世界永远不会寻找替代方案。而现在，许多国家正在建设新的技术体系、工业基础、运输通道，开发银行、支付系统和安全机制。这并不意味着一个全新的世界秩序已经成熟，也不意味着所有替代体系都能够顺利运行。但它至少说明了一点，越来越多的国家正在为一个不再完全依赖美国的未来做准备。美国的盟友也开始重新思考自己的处境。过去，他们可以作为美国体系中的重要节点，享受稳定的市场和安全保护。但当美国自身变得更加不稳定，更具进攻性，甚至开始要求盟友承担越来越高的代价时，这种从属关系就会出现裂缝。真正的转型往往不是某一天突然宣布发生，而是在无数个看似局部的选择中慢慢完成。一个港口被出售，一项能源协议被改变，一种货币被更多的用于结算，一家企业进入另一个国家的工业领域，一个联盟开始寻找新的安全安排。单独看，每一件事都可能只是经济行为，放在一起，它们就构成了世界权力结构正在移动的证据。但我们也必须保持清醒，帝国衰落并不等于立刻崩溃，旧体系瓦解也不意味着新体系一定更加公平。权力转移的过程往往伴随着误判、冲突、经济动荡和安全风险。最令人担忧的是，当决策者发现传统手段越来越无效，却仍然拒绝承认现实，甚至把失败归咎于敌人、盟友和普通民众。这样的逻辑如果继续发展，可能让战争升级，让社会分裂，也让本来可以通过谈判解决的问题变得更加危险。所以，这期节目真正留给我们的启示，不是简单的判断谁正在崛起，谁正在衰落，而是提醒我们重新思考，一个国家应当如何面对自身的局限，一个社会应当如何分配财富，一个国际体系又应当如何在没有绝对霸权的情况下维持基本规则。未来的世界或许不会再由单一国家决定所有方向，而会进入一个更加复杂、更加多中心，也更加充满不确定性的时代。对普通人来说，我们无法左右大国之间的每一次博弈，却可以努力看清新闻背后的利益链条，不被单一口号牵着走，也不把复杂问题压缩成简单的敌我对立。能源价格为什么上涨？债务利息由谁承担？战争成本最终落到谁身上？所谓的经济繁荣又惠及了谁？这些问题才是理解国际局势和现实生活之间联系的入口。如果一个旧时代正在结束，那么真正重要的就不是怀念它曾经多么强大，而是思考下一个时代应该建立什么样的规则。是继续依靠制裁、胁迫和竞争，还是重新寻找平等合作、相互尊重与共同安全的可能？这不仅关系到美国，也关系到世界上每一个国家，更关系到我们每个人未来的生活。你怎么看美国霸权的变化，以及这个正在形成的多中心世界？欢迎在评论区留下你的判断，也欢迎点赞订阅，继续收看更多精彩视频。